Welcome to your Aligned as Fuck Life podcast, hosted by your girl, Shalvika. I am a life transformation coach, a wife, a cat mom, pure generator, Enneagram 3, Pisces sign, and helping you build an aligned as fuck life is my jam. Out in this world, we believe that there are no set rules for building a life, career, and business. That we are all unique and we should be able to embrace our uniqueness in everything we do while shedding all the rules or bullshit rules one at a time. We will talk all things mindset, manifestation, healing, energetics, rituals, success, and so much more. I believe that I can have it all, and you can too. Ready for an episode that will take you one step closer to your aligned as fuck life? Let's get started. Hi, hello, and welcome to another episode of Your Aligned as Fuck Life with Shalvika. And I am literally so excited. I know I say this to most of my episodes, but I'm literally so excited today because we're kind of diving into something that I haven't diving into. I don't know. I forget the word. But we're going to talk about astrology and how we can use that to facilitate more and bring more alignment into our life with our beautiful guest, Chelsea. Hi, Chelsea.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Shalvika. I'm excited to be here.
I am so excited to have you here. Welcome to this podcast. And before we dive into our conversation, I just want you to kind of share your journey and tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, how you got here.
Sure. My name's Chelsea Jewell. I call myself an intuitive astrologer. So I practice astrology and I also practice a lot of very woo-woo modalities. Really, astrology is all about helping me connect into my intuition and using my gifts to help others live lives in their most aligned way as well. I also do spiritual coaching and kind of mix all of that in, but my path, I used to work in corporate marketing and I was climbing the corporate ladder, I think as so many of us do. And I reached actually not the pinnacle of marketing, but I reached my dream job and I had my dream job back in 2018. And I got to the end of it and was sort of well, what do I do now? And this wasn't actually, it didn't bring me as much alignment and fulfillment as I thought it would. So where do I go from here? And that's when I started asking lots of questions of who am I? What am I here to do? And that's when I got into astrology and all the spiritual stuff. And I wasn't planning on making it a career, but that's when it all just sort of unfolded for me of these things have really helped me come into alignment with myself. And so what I share comes from a very genuine place of wanting others to find whatever it is that really lights them up.
That is so cool. It's so amazing that so many people that I talk to actually have very similar. I worked for an American manufacturing company for 8.5 years, and the same thing, right? On paper, everything was super fucking awesome. I had the job, I had the opportunities, I could travel through work, I was making a shit ton of money, and there was this constant voice within me that just kept wondering that I want more, but what more? And after a point, I think you kind of realize as you climb the corporate ladder that that's not really fulfilling that more that you're seeking. And that's how I also got into coaching. So thank you for sharing that.
That's on the level of the soul, right? We can fulfill all of the physical needs, but the soul is I need something deeper than this.
Absolutely. In fact, I'm so glad you brought that up. Last year in 2022, I decided to just throw out all money goals. I was I'm not gonna have a target of how much income I want to have, because you know what, I'm safe and I'm secure in that. But that's what we are as entrepreneurs. That's what we are told, that you need to always be making more. And I was just you know what, I'm going to focus on impact. I'm going to focus on working with more and more people. So I literally gave away coaching for free. I started this podcast. I did a lot of things that were impact driven rather than just revenue driven. And that's just like lights me the fuck up.
Yeah. That's a
Yeah.
that's like a really bold choice to make, but I think a lot of people are starting to make more choices like that and finding
Right.
deeper
Yeah.
soul fulfilling alignment with that. I think that's so cool.
Yeah. And I think somewhere COVID kind of gave the world the pause it needed. Like before that, people didn't have the time to think about what I want. Like it was always about the next step, the next step, the next step. Right? And then COVID just like brought the whole world to a standstill, and people were like, okay, now what? And I think that, and of course, I mean, I do want to acknowledge the privilege that I have in being able to, just go out there and say that, you know what, I'm not going to focus on my money goal and I'm going to focus on my people goal because, well, my needs were taken care of. But yeah, anyway, let's come back to what we are here to talk about. So, tell I am an absolute novice when it comes to astrology. Okay, so how would you say you use astrology to kind of add magic and bring alignment into people's lives?
Yes. Well, it's a really good point because I think a lot of people are familiar on a pretty surface level with astrology. We think of like the horoscopes we see in the
Right,
newspaper or magazines, but that is
right,
one small, small, small part of your whole astrology chart. So we have in
right.
astrology, every planet falls into a certain sign and a certain house, and then they interact with each other in different ways. So it's if you ever see your full astrology chart, it's not just that sun sign that you're used to looking at your
Right.
horoscope for. It is like a huge wheel of things filled with all of these little hieroglyphic looking icons, and they all have
Right.
information about you, your potential, what your soul chose to come into this life with. And for me, when I started using astrology, it felt like a giant validation and a giant reminder of who I actually am and what's important to me. And it gave me a lot of
Right.
permission to get into the things that actually come very naturally to me that had kind of like been conditioned out of. So astrology
Yeah.
really is a tool to like bring you back to yourself in a lot of ways. And that is what alignment's all about.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, and I experienced that to a certain level with human design. Like the first time that I read about it, I was just like, I don't know. Like, I'm an engineer, I'm a science student. Like, like, what is that? But I think what you said, I felt so seen,
Yeah.
right? Like, and I think that is something that a lot of us kind of lack in life because we are, again, told to follow this fucking checklist. Like we're given that checklist at birth, right? Like, I mean, and especially if you're born in like an Asian family, like Indians. Oh my god! Like you go to college, you get a degree, then you do your masters, and then you get a good job, and then you buy your first car, and then you find a nice boy, and then you get married, and then you buy a house, and it's just. It's like your whole life is predefined for you. There's like a template that people just want you to fit into.
Yeah.
And most of us don't fit into that. And people who fit into that, like good for them. Like I'm really happy for them. But I think a lot of us are kind of just raised, um, being conditioned to suppress who we are to fit into these societally acceptable versions of ourselves, which take us so far away from us.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And it's so interesting because even like the word template or blueprint is often used with astrology or human design, but the difference in what we're talking about is the way kind of mass culture and society expects us is like, here are 5 predefined templates for everyone to fit into. Here are like the roles
Right,
expected of you. You can be the productive, achieving one. Here's that template. You can be
right,
the outcast or the misfit or whatever all of these different templates are. But astrology or something like human design is a template and a blueprint exactly for you and your soul. And that's not meant to be limiting of like
right,
have to be. It's more of like guidance. Like it's more of like a roadmap of like, here's how to remember what's actually aligned with you and your true nature. Like I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. Um, one of my
Yeah.
favorite examples to use is in my own chart. I'm a Leo sun, and I've always identified as that, as being really kind of upbeat, outgoing, social, happy. And it wasn't until I discovered when I really dug into my full chart that I'm also a Scorpio
Right.
rising. Scorpio is very different from
Okay.
Leo. It's more internal, it's more intense, it's more emotional. And my whole life, like
Right.
especially in high school and college, I had always lived under the assumption that you wanna be a chill girl. Like, you don't wanna be too much, you don't
Yeah.
wanna care too much, you just wanna be chill and go with the flow. And once I started reading more about Scorpio and being a Scorpio rising, I was like, "Oh, wait, I'm naturally a very intense person." And, like, I have, like, rejected that part of
Yeah.
myself because it wasn't part of this societal template, but, like, that is part of who I am, and, like,
Yeah.
I can find ways to love and express that, and it really helped me, like, come back into alignment with that part of myself that I had really rejected because I wasn't fitting into this expectation of being a
Right.
chill, go with the flow kind of person.
Right. Yeah. 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 That is. Yeah. That's very. And that I think. And again, like I'm like I said, I'm an absolute novice when it comes to astrology. So I have like no idea. But you know, like in India, like in the Eastern astrology, we use moon signs, right? I think we use sun signs in Western and we use moon signs. So my moon sign is Scorpio, and for the longest time, like I've been like raised being told that this is the kind of person you are because you are like you have Scorpio as your moon sign. And I think that ends up being another template, which is why I've like run away
Yeah.
from astrology like throughout, because that was again another predefined box that I was supposed to kind of fit in. So
Yeah.
I think people usually don't take the time to explore the unique nature of their own charts and kind of dig into the nuances of what makes them who they are,
Yeah.
and just put them in these like buckets and this is who you are. uh, and yeah, like I personally like have had that.
Yeah, well, I think that's a really good point because I see that with like in the US where I live as well, a lot of people with sun signs, and that's why I think a lot of people don't
Right.
resonate with astrology because they do see and think that it's just this one thing, your sun sign or your moon sign. When
Right.
there's a
Yeah.
couple different things I would speak to about that. One is that astrology is like you're more than just your sun sign or your moon sign, and everything kind of interacts together in a very
Right.
unique way. The other thing I would say
Right.
is that every sign and every planet exists on a spectrum of energy. So, like a Scorpio
Right.
moon, for example, has a lot of different it has a lot of shadow potentials, a lot of light potentials, and like a million different expressions in between. So even with unlimited piece of information like that, it's not saying like that is kind of very surface level astrology, which is like, okay,
Right.
so here's how I am. Whereas when you really get into
Yeah.
like depth of soul or intuitive astrology, which is what I practice, there is a whole world of choice of like how do you want to express this energy. Scorpio moon, like in its
Right.
shadow sign, for example, Scorpio is actually my favorite sign of the zodiac. I feel like I'm not supposed to have favorites as an astrologer, but I do. Scorpio, like in its shadow side, can be very like manipulative and power hungry and vindictive. In its highest light side, it's the archetype of the shaman or the alchemist that like takes these raw pains and materials and turns them into something else, into strength, into gold. So, and then there's like a
Right.
million ways to express that in between. So,
Yeah.
again,
Yeah.
I think astrology can be used as another kind of limiting thing, which is a very good thing to call out. But when you really use it with the intention of expanding into your divine self, it's an amazing tool that
Yeah.
can be used in that way.
Yeah. So, do you want to maybe like dive into? I think you have my chart. So, do you want to
Yeah.
maybe like, if we could just, I think that'll be interesting to kind of go through at this point.
Yeah. And I have your chart up. I use Western astrology. So one thing that I like to say is that astrology is a language. It's an energetic language of the cosmos, and we all
Right.
kind of speak different dialects of that language. So when we look at like Vedic or Western astrology, or even different house systems and things like that, they're all valid. It's really about like
Right.
the type of dialect that really speaks to you and your soul. So with your chart, I have up, I guess let me ask you this, because there's so much that I could go into, and I could either start with what's pulling my attention in your chart, or is there any particular area of life that you are like, how can I get into further alignment with myself that I can look at in your chart?
Okay. So let's do. So when you say what area, like, do you mean like relationships and business, things like that, or like?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about business. Like, let's get specific. Let's talk about my business.
Perfect. Okay. So for business, I look at a couple of different areas in the chart. I'm looking at your chart, the 10th house, which is the house area related to career, legacy, reputation. And you have actually quite a few
Okay.
planets in the 10th house. Your 10th house is ruled by the sign of Capricorn, which is also all about work and structure and achievement and leadership. What I'm really seeing in your chart, because for anyone who is listening and is familiar with astrology, in the
Right.
Western system, Shalvika is an Aries rising. So in her 10th house, Capricorn, you have the planets Uranus, Neptune, and Saturn there. So those are all outer planets. And it tells me a couple things. It tells me that with Uranus here, you're here to really shape up the way we do business. Capricorn can very much represent like tradition and the way we traditionally do or think about work. Like it feels very much like what you were describing before, of a kind of traditional 9 to 5 job. That is an aspect of Capricorn. But with Uranus in there, you're here to be like a change maker in that whole paradigm of like, let's rethink the way we do business. Let's rethink the way we look at leadership. You also have Neptune there, and Neptune, where we have Neptune, is the area of life where we're very open and intuitive and receptive to not just like information, but information from the spirit realm. So
Right.
you use a combination of like your very strong innate business sense with this sort of like other world connection of like that intuitive connection of what actually feels like what feels right to me. So one piece of guidance I would give you with that is to really lean into trusting your intuition and your instincts as you make business decisions, because it's one of the areas where you are most naturally intuitive. Does that make sense for you?
It makes so much sense. Like, one of the winning results that I'm working on currently is to just like trust my inner guidance. Like, because I think, again, right, like we fall into that trap of, oh, but this is a business. Like, should I be doing this? Like, you have those cringe moments when you kind of listen to your intuition, and your intuition is telling you to, I don't know, like just go and like fucking chill. And I'm like, but I'm in the middle of a launch or whatever, right? And I'm kind of, finding my way to that.
Yes. Well, I love that. This is actually what I love about astrology too, especially using astrology for people who are conscious in some way and like working on listening to themselves, because at that point what I find with readings is that your astrology chart often serves as a validation of things you're already doing, And
Yeah.
like your intuition's already leading you like to that winning result of my winning
Right.
result is to listen to myself. Your chart validates that. And if you were, not as conscious or kind of sleepwalking through life, that may not necessarily mean as much to you as it does now, that you already are feeling that and your chart is just confirming
Right.
it.
And I think at some levels that is so important because, like what you were talking about, Uranus and shaking things up and, being a change maker. And there are times when I just feel like I've had this conversation with my husband. I'm like, I just feel like I'm always fighting,
Mm.
right? Like, because, I'm trying to do things differently. I'm like, my husband's family is a business family. So they're all like, my father-in-law owns a business. Everyone's like into business. And they have this specific way of how business is done, right? And then every time I have conversations with them, they're like, but why are you doing this? You should be doing this. You should be doing it this way. And in my head, I'm like, no, like, I want to do it this way. So it just feels like I'm always fighting. And now that you say that, I am like, that part of me feels validated that it's okay. Like, this is what it's it's gonna mean to be me, and that's fine because this is who I am. That's the path that I'm on.
Exactly. Yeah, like that. I
Yeah.
love that feeling of like resistance. I feel like this message for you is a validation that feeling of being met with resistance over and over again from family expectations, corporate culture. That resistance is not a sign that you're doing something wrong or that you need to change. It's a sign like,
Right.
oh, I'm actually on the right path because I'm meant to be changing.
Right.
Like, it kind of gives me the visual
Right.
of someone going through the jungle and like hacking out a path in the jungle for the first time. Like you're carving a new path for
Right.
others to follow in this business world. And so of course, like you're going to run into vines and big branches and trees
Yeah.
that you have to tear down. And again, that's not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're
Right.
carving a path.
On the path. Yeah, yeah. And it's like even before we like hit record, like I was sharing with you that the whole idea of this podcast for me is to kind of, have create a bank of role models for people who want to do it, not like go off the beaten path and you who want to do things differently. So I think that just kind of ties the whole thing up.
Yes, totally. One more message, because I know like we don't have a ton of time, but one more message. Actually, maybe two more things if I can share from your chart.
Okay. For sure.
So
Yeah.
the houses that are related to business and money and work for you are all ruled by earth signs, which are Capricorn, Taurus, and Virgo. So the other thing that tells me is when it comes to business and work, you want to work with the element of earth and incorporate those types of practices a lot into your business. What that means is, and play to those strengths that you have, which are being very grounded, being very like practical, resourceful, creating systems and efficiencies. Earth is the sign of like the physical, tangible world. And so there's also a message
Right.
here, like, you may be someone who you're here to change the way we see and look at and do business. And also, while there are other aspects of you that are more spiritually inclined or woo woo or more of like that kind of water element, when it comes to your
Right.
business, it's like a reminder of your strengths though are that you are so grounded. Like you may mix in a lot of spiritual things, but you do it in a
Right.
very grounded way. So always come back to that earth element because that's one of your biggest strengths in your business of like making things tangible, making things practical for
Right.
people. A lot of people in the spiritual community can talk about really kind of fluffy and ethereal ideas,
Yeah.
but they never really
Yeah.
give grounding information of how to make that work in your daily life. And that's where that earth element that
Right.
you in is like, we're not just talking about manifestation. We're not just talking about human design or astrology for the sake of talking about it. We're
Right.
talking about it for the sake of aligning the fuck out of your life. And here's how to do it.
Right. Right. And it's again like it's very interesting because like at the end towards the end of last year I hosted like a 21-day manifestation experience. Which was like for me it was unlike any manifestation thing that I had done because I literally like went into the science of how everything works. Like that's
Yeah.
what the whole basis was. Like why do something, as I do a lot of vision board parties. So why do vision boards work? I actually went into how our brains work. And that's the response I got from most of my like clients. They were like, for us, we were always told that, oh, you should visualize. But I never knew. Like it always just felt so woo-woo, as if something outside of me is doing it for me. And which is true. Like I'm a massive believer of source and universe and energies, and I think that there's always something at play. But there is also like a massive scientific element on how our brains like literally do. So my approach is always, how can I make it more usable and practical and something that my clients can just follow without feeling like, oh my god, like the fuck.
Yeah,
So yeah.
exactly. So that is exactly like that element I'm talking about, making it tangible, usable, integrating it into our daily lives. Like that is, whether you're talking about something spiritual or something like a new way of doing business, like that is your core strength for sure.
Right. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
This is very interesting.
One more
Okay,
thing.
so yeah.
Okay, sorry. Go
Yes,
ahead.
please. No,
Okay, I
you
was
go
gonna.
ahead. You go ahead.
Okay. I'll share one more thing. One other thing that
Yes.
I really like to look at in a chart, it's more like on the soul level, is called the North Node, which represents kind of like our karmic destiny. So it's not specifically related to just career. It's related to like our overall soul path contract.
Right.
And your
Right.
North Node is in the sign of Aquarius in the 11th house. So what that tells me is Aquarius is like a visionary, very much about humanitarianism, about groups and communities and how we're all connected, but we can all be diverse and celebrated for our individuality. So what this tells me is no matter what you're doing in your business and how you're currently expressing your purpose through work or through anything in life, this overall direction of being able to find community and causes that you care about is so important to your soul. And it gives me a little bit of that feeling of what you were talking about, of feeling like you're always kind of fighting against something. Aquarius can feel that way because it's also kind of like a rebel. That's also like the change maker type of energy. And so Aquarius asks us to find like not what we're fighting against, but what we're fighting for, and to continually like set our compass to move us in that direction.
Right. Interesting. Cool. This is very interesting. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this.
You're so welcome. It's so much fun for me. This is like what I love to do. So I like whether someone wants to dive into this for themselves, I teach courses on astrology. There's a lot of stuff you can find online for free, but this is what's helped me like find my alignment. So I love teaching and helping people find that for themselves too.
So for someone listening, if they want to start on this, I know you said you teach some courses, but what do you think should be the first step to kind of just like introduction to astrology?
The very first step would be to look up your chart, like your whole chart. And you aren't going to understand what it means yet because there's a lot of symbols and interpretation and things like that. But I think that will help give you a sense of just how much information can be found in your chart. That's not just your sun or your moon sign. So I like to use the website astro.com, and it's free. You can find it. And then you can start looking up like little piece by piece Like, what does Mercury in Pisces mean? What does Sun in the seventh
Right.
house mean? And you can start with that.
Right. Right. And like, if someone wants to get a detailed reading, say from you, or detailed guidance rather from you, how would one go about it?
Yeah, so my website is chelseajewel.com, and I do
We'll add it to the show notes as well.
okay, perfect, thanks. I do intuitive astrology readings, sort of like I was just doing for you, but a lot more in depth. I also do what I call
Right.
channeled guidance readings, where it's less going into the details of your chart, but I'm using your chart sort of like as my portal to communicate with your guides
Right.
and your higher self. And that's more about just like getting real guidance and information and messages for you. And then
Right.
I'm not sure exactly when, but this spring, maybe April or May, I'm going to be teaching my astrology course live again. So right now it's on demand if anyone wants to learn how to do this for themselves. But I will be teaching it live again in the next couple months.
Cool. This will most likely be coming out in April, so I think you will be in the middle of launching it when this comes out.
Yeah, I'll definitely at least have more information about when it's coming up by then.
For sure. And we'll add all the links in the show notes for anyone who wants to go to Chelsea and learn from her. So before we kind of wrap up, is there anything, any message that comes to you that you want to share with whoever is listening?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Shalvika, so much for having me on. Thank you to everyone who's listened. I really appreciate it. I
course.
love talking about this stuff. The one thing I would say, especially like we kind of touched on this a little bit, but what's coming to me now is astrology is a tool, and like any tool, it can be used in a variety of ways. It can be used to limit you or box you in, or it can be used to expand and align. So keep that in mind for anyone who's listening, whether you are searching for someone to do a reading or a teacher or looking up information online for free. Like, keep in mind and pay attention to how you feel with someone's energy or around certain information. If it feels limiting and like another box to fit in, you don't have to take that, and you can go with something else. So I wanted to put that out there one more time, that astrology can be whatever you make it.
Like most things in life, I think that's so, and it's so important to just kind of, tune in and like bring your events. Like that's one of the biggest guiding factors, I think, is just asking yourself, like, does this feel right?
Exactly.
Okay, so before we wrap up, one last question. I ask this to all my guests. What is your one favorite book, TV show, movie, podcast, any form of media? It can be related to astrology. It might not be related to astrology. What is your all-time favorite?
Oh, such a great question. My favorite book of all time is one I actually read earlier this year, and I'm obsessed with it. It has become like my quote Bible. It's called The More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know Is Possible by Charles Eisenstein. It's not about astrology, but it is about, I think, is like the direction that we're heading in as a society, as a collective, basically like the new story of the world that we can choose to live in. It's amazing. I can't recommend it enough.
Cool. Interesting. I'm going to check it out. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Let me know what you think. I'm excited to hear.
All right. Thank you so much, Chelsea. I'm going to let you go. But yeah, I think I'm like really interested in maybe diving a little deeper into another aspects. Maybe we can do another episode. But for now, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you were here. And I had a lovely time.
I had a great time. Thank you so much, Shalvika. It was so great to chat with you.
Thank you so much for tuning in today's episode. If you absolutely loved what you heard today, be sure to share it with me by leaving a review on iTunes so that I can keep the good stuff coming. And if you aren't already following me on social media, come soak up some extra inspiration and send me a hello on Instagram by searching at Shalvika P. Also tagged in the show notes. I love and adore you so much, and I will talk to you super soon. In the meantime, continue building your most authentic and aligned as fuck life. Ciao!